So one big thing I've been seeing quite a lot when it comes to Dune Awakening is how many people are going to be able to be playing together, specifically in the Deep Desert, which is the most endgame portion of Dune Awakening, and one of the big elements of why Dune Awakening can very much be considered an MMO. So I'm going to go over all the information we've gotten in the past and the most up-to-date information we have from public sources. Now, I've done this a handful of times in previous videos, but if you're new to Dune Awakening, you kind of need to know how it's going to work as a whole. If you've watched a bunch of my previous videos and you know how Dune Awakening works a bit more, you can probably skip the next 1 to 2 minutes. But once you start up Dune Awakening, you're going to create your character, and then you'll choose what overarching world you want to be in. You can think of this as choosing your realm or main server in another MMO. If you're in World of Warcraft, you would go choose a realm. That's similar to what you're doing here. If you choose, say, World 1, only other people who choose World 1 you will ever see playing in that world, and presumably you'd have to make another character to go play on one of the other overarching worlds. So no matter what else we talk about in this video, the world you choose will only have the other people that choose that world on it, no matter where you are. But after that, you're going to be put into a starting scenario that's like 10 to 15 minutes. This just teaches you some of the base elements of the game, gives you some starter stuff, and then once you leave that, you go into the first area you're going to be in, which you'll be in for a while, called Haga Basin, and it puts you into like a starting zone of Haga Basin. Now, Haga Basin is going to have a lot less players than you would expect from something being called an MMO. It's going to have about 40 to 50 players, and there'll be a bunch of different Haga Basins on your overarching world. Now, I'm not exactly sure how you'd be able to go to other Haga Basins, or you have to stay in the one you select. You will be able to see where your friends are, and if that specific Haga Basin is at a cap, you'd have to wait till someone leaves to be able to get into that. Now, Haga Basin is going to be the size of the Conan Exiles map, so it's going to be huge, but the main reason it's only going to have like 40 to 50 people is because this is where all of the permanent bases are going to be. If you build a massive base here and you keep your shield generator on, you pretty much can't lose that base, so it'll permanently be there. So they definitely don't want or aren't able to have hundreds of people running around making massive bases everywhere. It would just start to be too laggy. So that's why the Haga Basin has a lot less players in those areas. Haga Basin is also primarily PvE focused outside of some specific noted areas that PvP will be enabled. Pretty much everything else is PvE focused, and you'll pretty much be staying here until you build your first ornithopter, which is your first flying vehicle. And once you've gotten that ornithopter, you can start to travel to the other areas of Dune Awakening. On launch, there'll be 2 social hubs, Arakeen and Harko Village. These are exactly as they sound. They're social hubs. They're not for combats or anything like that. You'll be able to go there to pick up quests, different objectives. The player hubs, you'll be able to see a bunch of other players. The developers have mentioned they want like 100 to 200 people in each instance of these social hubs. And because they're not combat areas, whenever one fills up, they'll just spin up a new instance and you'll be put into that, and then that'll start to fill up with other players. You will also be able to visit these social hubs specifically before you get your ornithopter. There are NPCs you can pay to take you to those. So if you're early on and want to visit the player auction or something like that, you'll be able to do that by talking to those NPCs. But then you have the final and most important area of the game, the Deep Desert. Now, the Deep Desert of Dune Awakening is where a lot of the end game is going to take place. You're going to see a lot more players here, and it's going to be massive. The Deep Desert is a massive play space stitched into 9 different zones that are all hosted on their same servers with seamless travel between them. Them being hosted on different servers is primarily just to allow there to be a lot more players in each zone. And this place is going to be like 9 times the size of Conan Exiles, so this place is going to be absurdly large. Now, when it comes to how many players are going to be here, that is where we don't have completely accurate or up-to-date information. Some of the NDA'd beta players or alpha players probably have some further information, but they might not even be fully up to date because with more optimizations, the developers could get more players into these areas. Now, like I mentioned, it's going to be split into 9 different areas. Each one of those areas has its own player cap, and if that area starts to hit its cap, there's going to be a few different things that can happen. The developers have talked about sending in sandstorms to move players out of that zone, or to send in different roadblocks or things like that, or potentially just not allow you in that zone and say there's a wall there you can't enter right now. So there's a handful handful of things they want to do more in-world to keep you from entering that zone or to try to push people out when it hits its player cap. Now, its actual player cap is where we don't have super accurate information. A long time ago, the developers mentioned that they wanted like 1,000 people to be in a battle together. That obviously is not going to be happening. That came up against technical limitations, so that was scrapped. Then at some point they did say they would wish to be able to have, let's say, 500 people in each one of these different zones or areas. They may not hit that as well. And some of the most recent information, they've just been saying hundreds of players. And in fact, the developers have pretty much always said that on your overarching world, they want thousands of players to be in that. And the Deep Desert doesn't have any instancing or sharding. So if you're in one area of the Deep Desert and any other player on your world that chose to play on your world are in that area, you will see them. There's no instancing, there's no phasing, no sharding, nothing like that. We still don't know how many players they want to be able to have in each one of these different meshed zones of the Deep Desert. Now, some of the maps we've seen from some of the live streams just says Deep Desert, hundreds of players. We don't know if that means they want hundreds of players in each of the 9 areas or if hundreds of players in the entirety of the Deep Desert. We pretty much know it's going to be at least 100 players in each one of the 9 zones as a cap. Presumably it's going to be more, and if they can keep optimizing the game, they may potentially be even increasing those caps. So I think at minimum expect like 100 possible player caps for each one of the 9 zones of the Deep Desert, which is still a lot of players. You definitely don't want to scoff at that. Most MMOs these days, even a lot of more old MMOs, really don't have 100 people like in combat with each other very often. Even in something like World of Warcraft, you're usually getting instance out so much that that doesn't commonly happen. You can still do it, but it's not super common, and it doesn't happen unless you're specifically trying to do something, and it can still be quite laggy. 100 people is a lot, and keep in mind in Dune Awakening, 100 people could also mean like 100 tanks or 100 ornithopters, so that can get pretty crazy, and everybody having multiple different abilities that have different special effects, that can still get pretty crazy. And one of the bigger reasons why they'll be able to have hundreds of people in, say, big battles in the Deep Desert and not in Haga Basin is because the main mechanic for the Deep Desert is that it wipes on a weekly basis. A big Coriolis storm comes through, wipes away the Deep Desert, means it'll pretty much remove all player buildings. It'll change up dungeons, change up points of interest, but the biggest one being removing all the player buildings. Player buildings in survival games is really where a majority of your performance is lost. If you've ever played like Rust or Ark or Conan Exiles and you go from like the first day of wipe on one of those servers and there's not tons of lag, and then you go a few days or weeks into a wipe or a new server and now there are bases everywhere, your performance is completely different because that's just crazy amounts of information and just in-game assets everywhere to load that's going to drop your performance. So the Deep Desert wiping every week means they're just allowed and able to have much bigger player counts on a much more consistent basis while having a lot more performance. So I would say in each of the 9 zones of the Deep Desert, we could be expecting like 1 to 500 player caps in all of them. I'd probably expect it to be closer to 100, maybe a couple hundred players. And depending on how all of the systems that try to push players out of those zones, how much those will activate, you may even be able to just have a lot more players than the cap of that area generally allows for. And then these kind of in-world mechanics come in and try to push players out. So I hope that gives you all the information you need and the most up-to-date information for how many players you can expect for the different areas of Dune Awakening, and more specifically all of the information on what we can expect for the Deep Desert. But that's pretty much all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.